to talk a little bit about how I got to where I got to. And mine is not a normal road, believe me. I actually started out as a painter, and I went to the Memphis Academy of Arts. And of course, Mr. Jones is here today running the Memphis College of Arts, but Memphis is, strangely enough, loves to change the names of all of their institutions at some point in the history of Memphis. But I was around when Rhodes was Southwestern, and it goes on and on from there. But I started out there, and actually I was mentored by Dorothy Sturm. She was an incredible driving force in my life. She basically told me I had to come back to the ABCs. She taught me about color theory. She took me under her wing, and I actually left Memphis in 1975, graduated the Memphis Academy of Arts, and went to Nashville and taught at Vanderbilt. Taught glasswork and painting at Vanderbilt and the night classes. And 2 years later, I lit out for New York City. And I went there as a scholarship, on a scholarship to Hunter College as a painter. Never, ever thinking I was going into food. There was no way. I mean, my mother was a great cook. I was brought up in a very orthodox, kosher family. I had never eaten bacon until I turned 17. I never had an oyster or a shrimp or no shellfish. So my life was very different than most of you think. But when I lit out to New York City, everything changed. I had a friend who was working for Martha Stewart, and basically she told me if I went to this New York restaurant school, she'd get me a job within 6 weeks. And so I did it. I waited to start graduate school for 6 months, went to this New York restaurant school, started working for Martha, quit after 1 week, and it was just a lovely experience. I was grilling smelts, and she kept berating me because the smelts kept falling through the grills out at her house in Darien, Connecticut. But after that, the night we graduated the cooking school, I was in the bathroom of the Lone Star Cafe. Back then it was on 5th Avenue and 13th Street. And the 80s were a great time in New York City. It was an amazing time there. And I met this woman in the bathroom. Her name was Susanna Trilling. She was from Austin, Texas. I was from Memphis, Tennessee. And she told me to come work for her catering business the next morning. I went down to Avenue A. Got off the subway, didn't know where I was, stepped over people who I thought were dead, got to her door, knocked on the door, and nobody came to the door, kept knocking, and so finally I heard somebody scream my name from 3 flights up, and she dropped a sock with a key. I walked up these really rickety stairs, got to the top of the stairs, this door opened, there was a loft, and there were women from Belize, Mexico, California, and there was 10 little apartment-sized stoves all put together to make one long, basically commercial stove. And I just was like, it was unbelievable. There was gumbo, there was people making moles, and I was just totally enamored. And I started working for Susanna, and I started also graduate school about 3 months later. And after 6 months in graduate school, Susanna came to me and she said, I'm getting ready to open a restaurant. I want you to drop out of school. I was like, I can't drop out of school. I'm on a scholarship. She goes, yeah, you can drop out of school. And I dropped out of school within 2 weeks. And I never looked back. We started catering for the head of GE and his doing breakfast in bed on 5th Avenue for him and his wife. We were doing Calvin Klein parties out way out in Long Island. They were flying him in on helicopters. I mean, we did the opening on the Nile Wing at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. We did for the Zacklers, who put up the money for it. We catered for all the Zacklers. We were everywhere. And I was having a ball. And about 6 months after that, Susanna decided she was going to move to Perth for the America Cup. And I started opening restaurants in New York City. And I opened the Bon Ton Roulette down in Tribeca before Tribeca was Tribeca. We had Rick's 181 Lounge. And then I opened Automatic Slims at the corner of Bank and Washington in the Village, which is still there today, 25 years later, which is sort of unheard of. What happened to me was I met a guy from Memphis. I had to go to New York to meet a guy from Memphis, of course. And he decided, he was in the film business, he decided that he was going to move back home. And I thought I'd never see him again. And 2 years later, he asked me to get married. And about a year after that, I came back home. It was not an easy thing to do. I did not want to leave New York City. And, but we got married, and I was pregnant with my first child. And I flew back and forth until I was 7 months pregnant, and Northwest was like, no more. You can't fly anymore, Karen. You have to pick a city. And so I picked Memphis. I came here, and it was Carol Coletta, who I always attribute to me getting my start here. She called me up and asked me if I would do the closing of Brooks before they were doing the renovation. And that was where Another Roadside Attraction got its start in 1987. And the rest is sort of history. It's a strange situation. My food looked like art. So when they came into Brooks, they didn't know whether to eat it or look at it. And I kept going, you can eat this food. No, 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 we can't eat this food. But basically from there, 6 years later, I opened Automatic Slims downtown. Actually, it was 4 years later, 1991, and I wanted to be downtown where there was people walking. I was used to people walking in New York City, and I didn't want to be a strip mall, and I didn't want to be in East Memphis. And downtown, 2nd Street was pitch black. There was nothing there. The Peabody had just opened in '76. I grew up with the Bells family. Gary was a very close friend of mine, and he did a phenomenal job in opening up the Peabody. So I finally found a space and opened Slim's in '91, and 17 years later I sold it. I had an incredible run downtown, and 13 years after we opened, we put an ad out saying, it's 13 years old, they've built a neighborhood around us, because for so long there was nothing there. And basically we were true pioneers when we opened Slim's. In 2005, one of my grill chefs got murdered in downtown Memphis, and I sort of lost the love for downtown. And I hate to say that, I shouldn't be saying that here today, but it is what made me want to sell Automatic Slims. But I had opened up the beauty shop in 2002. So for me, I had come into a neighborhood that was very endearing, and I opened up Dough Sushi in here in 2003. I get bored every 6 years, if you can tell. And to me, my restaurants are like paintings. I get bored, I've got to create, and if I'm not painting or drawing, I've got to get it out of my system. It's extremely important to me. I can't, otherwise I would close them all and move to another city and start over, which I've been going back and forth to New Orleans because to me it's an extremely creative town, and they really, you know, they love the funkiness of life, and you know, it's sort of a beautiful thing. But so in 2002 I opened the beauty shop, 2003 I opened Dough Sushi, and I decided when I started seeing a lot of sushi in all the Exxon stations over the last few years that I was really tired of doing sushi, and the Exxons could have it, and I was going to close this place and reinvent it, and that's what we did with Bar DKDC, which means don't know, don't care. And I turned 60 in December and opened up DKDC in January. I felt that I was at the age I could sort of name this restaurant what I wanted to name it. I felt I had proven my worth, and I could do that. And it wasn't a slap in the face, but it was like, it doesn't matter, just come in, enjoy it. The food's going to change every 6 weeks. I was voted into the Entrepreneurial Society in 2005 or 2006, and it was a great honor, to be honest. I was sort of like, why are you asking me? But I don't think of myself like that. I sort of shoot from the hip, and a lot of people ask me, how do you do it? If I stopped to think about how I did everything I do, I wouldn't do it anymore. I just sort of keep going. My husband passed away in 1998. My sons were young. They were 6 and 9, and they've turned out phenomenally. One's in New York City as a painter. It's all in the family. And he'll probably be in the restaurant business in about 10 years. I'm hoping not. And one is in Washington State as a sustainable architect and an organic farmer. But it is an interesting life because your restaurant family is really your family. And it's hard for people to believe, but you're spending more time in this restaurant than I ever spent at home. And so my kids started working in my catering business when they were 12. They started coming with me on gigs. They would come to the restaurants, they would wash dishes, they would serve. So now they don't want really any part of being in a restaurant because they had been brought up, you know, on my apron strings, so to speak. But for a woman in this business, I don't think about it so much, but I do know that when I moved back to Memphis, it was a good old boy society. Nobody ever thought I was going to last. The only person who gave me encouragement was Thomas Boggs, who I miss dearly. And he was like, you know, between my husband and Thomas, they were like, you know, Rosie, that was my middle name, you can do it. Just put your head down, do what you did in New York City, bring it home, do it, change this town. And we brought cuisine here that nobody had really ever experienced. You know, we brought decor here that nobody had ever experienced. When Slim's opened downtown in 1991, when they would walk in the door, their heads would turn in 360 degrees. It was the funniest thing you would ever see. You know, back then we had no iPhones. We'd have our cameras out. And it was like, there was art on the walls, and Wayne Edge's sculptures, which are still above your head, were on the walls. And I never had a contractor build any of my places. They were always, it was Wayne Edge, who is a sculptor, and he was my contractor, and Steve Webb, and Ed, and all these people that I went to the Art Academy with. And the people who did my bar stools were my friends in New York who were hat makers. And I just, you know, this bar was sculpted by Wayne, the bar at Molly's, which I opened Cielo. I have to take you back. I opened Slim's in 91. I opened Cielo, which was a fine dining French restaurant in my Victorian home where we lived, and we moved out in 1996. And then I opened the beauty shop in 2002, opened Doe in 2003, changed Cielo in 2007 to the Molly Fontaine Lounge, got bored, changed it, didn't want white tablecloths, and did the same thing with Doe, got sick of it. In 2013, opened up DKDC. So I have constantly I reinvent myself. And I believe that if you don't stay on the cutting edge, yes, there's a lot of young chefs coming into this town, and a lot's changed in Memphis, and it's been phenomenal. I am so excited about the new kids on the block, because this town needs it. This city needs to grow. And I've always come back here trying to bring something back to this city that I have found and learned in other places in my travels to Jamaica, or to Israel, or to New York City, or to San Francisco, or to New Orleans, or to wherever. You know, walking down the street, thinking in my crazy brain that I think this city needs new blood. It needs new blood every day. It needs the powers to be that run it to get a younger take on it. You know, for me, we should have been the next Atlanta. You know, we shouldn't be left behind. We should have turned the powers to be back when we had all the film business in the early 90s, when I was doing The Firm and The Client and The Rainmaker, and I can name numerous ones that have come here, Larry Flint, and we had so much business, but the city would never ever give the 60% tax incentive, and so all the film business went to Georgia, to Louisiana. You know, it's ridiculous. I don't know what's going on, but sometimes I just want to shake some people downtown and make them wake up. And I care about this city a lot. It's in my blood. Went to White Station High School, went to the Memphis Academy of Arts, left, went to New York City, came home 9 years later. I always knew I'd come home, brought something back. You know, I say to my boys, most Southern boys, they'll always come home. You know, you sort of miss part of that South. There's something that you're lacking in the North. It's great, it's amazing, you learn a lot, you meet great people, but it's not home. It's not the South. And now the South is huge. You know, the cuisine is huge. You know, Southern culture is not on the skids, it is big. And we should honor it and embrace it. And I just, I worry about Memphis. And then, yet, I do see changes on the horizon, but I believe that we need a lot more people to take risk. And for me as an entrepreneur, I guess I just, as a young child, always sort of like negated everything my mother said. She would say black, I would say white. She was from London, she told me I didn't talk right, so I would like go to speech therapy school, and then I was like, I had the hell with it. And my father was always like, it's okay, Rosie. He was from Memphis, she was from London. It was an interesting thing, but I always wanted to fight harder to prove somehow that I was good enough. And maybe that's what it took. Maybe her saying, you know, come on, Karen, do better, is what kicked me to keep going. But risk-taking was never a problem for me. I was a child of the 60s. We all took risk. We did everything we weren't supposed to do and then some. And I'm glad for everything I did. I have something I want to read that I wrote, and it was a speech I wrote for the ballet a few years back, but I think it's appropriate for today. And then after that, we can have some questions and stuff. As a woman working in kitchens in New York City, I spent years trying to be strong and tough, smoking unfiltered cigarettes, eating raw steak, drinking Jack Daniels, ignoring burns on my hands, all to prove myself to the boys. That side of my personality, like some unnecessary gland, has shrunk over the years. Now I know who I am. When I started working as a prep cook in New York City in 1980, the city's kitchens were filled with chain-smoking dead-enders. Today's chefs have college educations and math degrees. My first job in New York City while I was in graduate school as a painter was in catering. I met this girl in the bathroom of the Lone Star Cafe, and we started talking. One thing led to another, and I went to work for Susanna Trilling the next morning. I got off the subway on Avenue A in the Lower East Side, stepping over homeless people, passed out druggies, and wondering what I'd gotten myself into. I rang the bell. No one came. Finally, I heard someone calling my name, looked up, and Susanna threw me a key and a sock and told me to walk up to the 3rd floor. Upon entering, it was actually really sketchy. As I made my way up the rickety stairs, I started smelling these incredible aromas. When the door opened, there were 9 women inside a big loft with very small stoves, all pushed together, and people bustling about. I met women from Belize, Mexico, and Austin, Texas. They were rolling tamales, making gumbo, cooking Johnny cakes, and just getting ready for a gig. It felt like home. Remember, I'm a hometown girl from this funky, music-driven bluff city we call Memphis. First of all, I consider myself a visual artist, a food artist, and then a restaurateur. I am not in this business for the big bucks. If I was, I would have stayed in New York City. It is a passion, like dancing, painting, or playing music. I have this burning in me to create. I get bored every 6 or so years, and I want to do another piece, another restaurant. And yes, New Orleans is a possibility. Cooking and dance is a combination of routine, calculation, personal history, imagination, inspiration, and the basic of knowledge of how it all works. The movement on a stage, the movement in our kitchens, the sweat, the long hours, the sore muscles, the dance, the kitchen dance. A chef's job is to make sure that his line cooks have the tools, the training, and the confidence to cook the food the way he or she would. Our job is to accept and reject plates, keep portion size consistent, taste for salt, always, make salads, wipe down counters, make sure the walk-ins are cleaned and organized, administer Band-Aids to the dishwashers, change light bulbs, scrape dried eggs, yolks off the floor, and like a good lapdog, yap at the heels of cooks and waiters who arrive late, and to take all the credit, of course. As a cook and a chef, we are attempting to convey a message that food is sacred. We are paying homage to our Mother Earth, to the life force in this world. It would be unnatural to try to bring out the best of the ingredients and the best of myself if the food isn't to be shared and enjoyed. And these moments of sharing, as of today, connects us and encourages us to learn, to express ourselves, and to nourish ourselves spiritually from the same source of energy that is created at the table. Artists are craftsmen with a spiritual message. Part is physical and part is spiritual. So if I miss you tonight at my restaurant, I'll see you on your next visit. And please try to be glad for me. If I am home getting some rest, I need to read books that have nothing to do with food, to walk down a city street, to see what people are wearing, what painters are painting. I want to see the colors of an October day, to chew on the August humidity, and to endure the harsh January winds. I want to crave a soup or watermelon, leafy greens, or grilled smoky meats, depending on the weather. I don't want to learn about the change of the seasons from the faxes my purveyors send to me. There's no such thing as the perfect last meal because we don't want perfect meals to end. The perfect meal is the one that keeps on going. It's the endless movable feast. Thank you.